Here's the recording of pages 59 to 64. So we've got honoring the gods, religion in ancient Sumer. So the Sumerians learned to farm the land and take advantage of their natural environment. With levees and canals, they harnessed the rivers to grow rich fields of wheat and barley. With sailboats, they caught the winds and carried some of that grain by sea. They traded for timber, stone, and metals, and then shaped those resources into things they needed or wanted: furniture, jewelry, tools, and more. Still, there were many things Sumerians did not understand and could not control. Imagine for a moment that you are a farmer in ancient Sumer. One morning, as you walk down to the field to begin the day's work, you notice the river is covering a part of the land it has never touched before. By afternoon, it has swallowed half the field and is racing toward your mud brick hut. By nightfall, the flood has swept away levees, canals, and your entire village. Or perhaps one year the river begins to shrink. Soon, along the edges where the water once flowed, there's only mud, which turns to hard, cracked earth. The canals dry up, and the grain in the field turns yellow and sickly. The river falls further, the crops turn to dust, and the smell of death is in the air. The Sumerians had little understanding of how such forces of nature of such forces of nature. They did not know why rain fell, or why storms struck, or why the sun rose and set. They did not understand why diseases sometimes ravaged their villages, or why famine might visit their land. They knew only that they had no control over these things. An ancient Sumerian poem expresses the feeling of helplessness. Mere man, his days are numbered. Whatever he may do, he is but wind. And then here's part of the Euphrates River, and they're just kind of showing how possibly it could, you know, it could overflow or it could shrink. Oops. Gods of moon, sun, and rain. The Sumerians had no scientific answers to such mysteries, so they explained them in their own way. They decided that all the forces of nature were alive. A clap of thunder was alive. The moon and sun were alive. So were the rain and the winds. In fact, to ancient Sumerians, most of the world around them, trees, rivers, sky, earth, and just about everything else, seemed to be alive with mysterious powers. The Sumerians began to worship many of the forces of nature. They worshipped a god of the sun and a god of the moon. They worshipped a god who ordered the rain to fall, which filled the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. They worshipped a goddess who was the source of fertile soil. Their whole world was filled with gods, as well as with countless demons, spirits, and ghosts. All these supernatural beings, the Sumerians believed, caused things to happen in the world around them. Let's read a Sumerian story that will help us understand what these ancient people thought about the power of the deities. Deities are gods and goddesses. The Sumerian story of the Great Flood. In those long ago days, there were many, many people living long and fruitful lives. But they made so much noise that the gods could not sleep. So the gods became irritated and decided to destroy all of humanity by sending a flood to cover the earth. One god, named Enki, pitied the humans and decided to warn one good man named Utnapishtim that the flood was coming. Enki told Utnapishtim to tear down his house and build a boat. The good man listened to the words of the god. He built a boat, and into it he loaded all of his possessions, along with his family, all his relatives, and all the craftsmen. He loaded all the animals of the fields, both wild and tame. Then a black cloud arose in the sky, and all that was bright turned into darkness. The rains came and the winds blew. Even the gods were frightened by what they had done. For 6 days and nights the flood marched over the earth and waged war like an army. Then on the seventh day the sea grew calm and the flood was stilled. Utnapishtim looked out at the world from his boat. All was silent. He could see no land, only water. All mankind had turned to mud. He sat down and cried. Then a mountain appeared in the distance. The boat moved toward the mountain, became grounded on it, and would not budge. Utnapishtim set loose a dove that flew away, but found no resting place because the waters had not receded. So the dove returned. Later the man set loose a swallow, and it flew away, but found no resting place. It too returned. Finally the man set loose a crow. The crow saw that the waters had gone down. It ate and flew around and cawed, and it did not return. Utnapishtim gave thanks that he was alive. He sacrificed a sheep and made offerings to the gods. Because the man was so good, the gods gave him eternal life. But the rest of humanity was not so lucky. The deities decided human beings should live shorter lives. So from then on, people died younger. Fewer people, less ruckus. So the Great Flood. Stories about a catastrophic flood appear in the traditions of many peoples. One famous account, which occurs in the book of Genesis in the Bible, tells how Noah built a huge ark to escape the flood. Many scholars have concluded that the Sumerian and the biblical accounts of a great flood are related. So the Sumerians believed that powerful, unpredictable gods controlled everything. If the gods were happy, human beings would be happy. If the gods were angry, the whole world might be destroyed. The gods could easily change their minds and their moods. One moment they might be satisfied with people, but the next moment they might be very angry. Anything the gods wanted to do, they did, as you'll see in this next story, which tells what the Sumerians believed about how the world was created. And this was found at the temple of the goddess Ishtar. This stone worshiper with clapped hands revealed gazes. What does that say? Gazes up, heavenward. Okay, so heavenly, towards the heavens. Okay, the Sumerian story of the creation of the world. Once there was only endless sea, and from this sea a mountain grew. The mountain was heaven, and the earth joined together. The god of heavens and the goddess of earth gave birth to a son. His name was Enlil, and he was god of the air. Enlil separated heaven and earth. Heaven became the sky and the great above. Earth became the land and the great below. They were separated by air. But the world was still in darkness. Enlil was caught in the darkness and did not like it. So he and his wife gave birth to the moon. The moon god sailed across the sky in a boat, bringing light to the dark blue firmament. Around the moon, the little ones, the stars, were scattered like grain. Around the moon, the big ones, the planets, walked like wild oxen. Still it was dark during the day, so the moon god and his wife gave birth to a second deity, the sun god. The sun god rose in the mountain of the east and set in the mountain of the west. The world was bright. Okay, so these stories, some of them terrifying, others charming, helped the Sumerians explain the world around them. Sumerians thought they should honor their gods, so they carved statues of their powerful deities from stone. And from those statues, we can see what they thought the gods looked like. Many looked like the statues the Sumerians made of themselves. Okay, human beings, slaves of the gods? In the minds of the Sumerians, their gods looked like humans, and they acted like humans. They liked good food and fine clothing. They got married and had children. Sometimes they were kind and sometimes they were cruel. Either way, the Sumerians believed they had no control over what the gods did. Rather, the Sumerians believed that humans were slaves of the gods. The next story tells why. All right, the Sumerian story of the creation of man. The gods had always toiled for a living, but when the goddesses were created, the gods had to work even harder to keep them happy. Producing enough bread to eat and enough clothing to wear was now a great chore. They decided that they needed servants who would take care of their needs. So they took some clay from the moist ground. They shaped the clay until arms and legs appeared, and then they gave the clay life. Thus was man made from river mud and given life by the gods. Men were placed on earth as servants of the gods. They gave food, clothing, and shelter to the gods. They set the gods free from ever having to work again. As this story shows, the Sumerians believed that humans were created to be slaves of the gods. They were fated to spend their lives working hard in order to free the gods from toil. Being the slaves of the gods wasn't easy. The Sumerians lived in fear of the gods' anger and tried to keep them happy by building temples and worshiping them. Religious ceremonies became a very important part of people's lives. They were a way to convince the gods that humans were serving them as they should. Wealthy Sumerians even paid artists to make statues of themselves carved in prayer that could be placed in temples to show the gods their devotion. Since the greatest gods were busy with many important undertakings, each Sumerian believed he or she was a minor god as a personal god. The Sumerians pleaded with their personal gods to put in a good word for them with the more powerful gods. Through worship and blind obedience to the whims of their gods, the Sumerians hoped to gain protection from disasters such as floods, droughts, diseases, and famine. But how did the people know what would please the gods? They didn't, or at least most of them didn't. Only the priests and seers could fathom such mysteries. The priests, it was said, could talk to the gods and learn what would make them happy. Seers could read omens from sheep's livers and oil patterns. They could also tell a person whether he or she had displeased the gods and what rituals should be performed to remove the disfavor. Priests and seers were believed to be the gods' representatives on earth. And that, as you can imagine, made the priests well respected and powerful. All right, now on 64, you're just going to take a look at a world alive with gods and goddesses. And here are some of the gods and goddesses. And so An was the Sumerian god of the sky. Nehursag was Mother Earth, okay, the source of fertile soil. Enlil was Lord Wind and god of the air. And Inkai meant Lord Earth was the master of all beneath the ground. Nana was the moon god, the son of Enlil and his wife, Ninlil. And Shamash was the sun god who returned every day to choose away the darkness. Inanna, or Ishtar, was the goddess of love and war. And then Naphistum was a mortal favored by Enkai, and his name means he has found life. Okay, so that's the reading to page 64, and then the next reading will pick up the rest of this. So this is the end of the reading of pages 59 to 64.